So, good morning, everyone. I'm past KACo President and Scott County Magistrate David Livingston. We're going to shift our focus to what's happening at the Capitol and what counties can expect in the upcoming legislative session. We're fortunate to have with us today two of the most influential leaders in state government, Senate President Robert Stivers and House Speaker David Osborne. They are joined by KACo President and Harlan County Judge Executive Dan Mosley and KACo's Director of Government Affairs Shellie Hampton, who will lead the conversation. Please join me in welcoming our panel for Insights from the Capitol, a conversation with legislative leadership.
Speaker Osborne, President Stivers, I don't know if this mic's on.
It's on.
It's on, yeah. That's what happens when you get a doll made after you like that. It's a direction.
Can you hear me? Okay.
All right. So they say we're working. All right. Speaker Osborne, President Stivers, thank you for joining us here today at the first annual KACo conference. We know how busy your schedules are, especially heading toward the start of the legislative session, which is coming up January 6th. On behalf of all Kentucky counties, we're very grateful for your leadership in addressing critical county matters over the last several sessions. Thank you both for being here today. Shellie, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you, President Mosley. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it when you join us. So 47 days, not that anybody's counting, till session gavels in. Of course, it's the long session, 60 days, budget session, very important to the folks in this room as well as you all and all your members. I wonder if you could kick us off by talking about maybe some of your all's priorities for your caucuses, including the budget priorities, which may still be in question given what's happening or not happening or what we don't know at the federal level with programs that take up a great amount of the state budget like Medicaid, Medicare, education. So, Senator Stivers?
Well, you probably should have started with the speaker since the budget always starts in the House.
Let's mix things up.
Okay, all right. Well, first of all, it's getting a budget. That has to be our number one priority. It's the ultimate policy document. Whatever happens in Kentucky can't happen without the dollars being appropriated to it. We want to make sure we continue to be fiscally responsible. We have good communications about what's going on. We want to create through this budget document the most competitive situation we can. And competitive is really changing, especially after you just heard the gentleman speak about artificial intelligence. But I think it's one, making sure we don't overspend, that we control a lot of the different things that have gotten us into problems, that we focus on those problems that we've been able to mitigate, like our pension issues over the last few years, and continue to create the best workforce and infrastructure dynamics and tax code dynamics to bring jobs to this state and grow the jobs that we have.
Speaker?
Well, obviously it starts with the budget, and hopefully we'll get the budget out in pretty quick order. We've done a much better job the last few cycles of being proactive on the budget. You know, it never did completely make a lot of sense to me the way we did the budget, because we'd have the entire interim, we'd have our budget review subcommittees that would meet, they'd bring in all the cabinet heads, we'd take all the testimony, get all the documentation. As soon as the interim was over, we'd immediately wrap it up, throw it in the garbage can, wait a month for the governor to present a budget, and then start our work. And that just didn't seem productive. So we've actually utilized our interim very intensely, and drilled down into the makings of a significant budget document pretty early in the session. Robert is exactly right. I think I made the statement the other day at a chamber event that I thought this was going to be the most difficult budget that we were going to construct, and since we've been in the majority. I think that was misconstrued as being a contentiously difficult budget, one where there's lots of fighting and arguing over it. I don't think that's it. I just think that there is a difference. There's going to be a difference in philosophies because there is uncertainty, and everybody deals with uncertainty in a different manner. How much reserve are we comfortable with? As Robert said, this is a relatively new phenomenon. It seems like we've been on sound financial footing now for a little while, but the fact of the matter is we were only 8 years removed from a $60 billion budget or pension liability. And that was only 16 years removed from a fully funded pension system. So you can see how quickly things change when you don't stay focused on what got you there. And so I think you're going to see us budget exactly the same way, which is based on needs, not wants. Being very conservative in the way we budget, making sure we invest taxpayer dollars as wisely as possible and as efficiently as possible. But at the same time, also making sure that we have plenty of money in reserve to deal with the uncertainty. What that number looks like, how that impacts tax policy, those will all be part of the discussion that we frankly haven't had the last several budgets that we've constructed.
Fair enough.
Jails have been a constant topic of conversation. Our board has directed our advocacy focus in 2026 to work with the legislature on reshaping the responsibility for county jails to embrace the role counties play in the overall corrections system with legislation that would incentivize more regional jail concepts where it makes sense, clarify responsibility for pretrial felony detainees, and redefine the state inmate model. Could you all share your thoughts and what your respective chambers may be looking at when we talk about jails and next steps for those?
Yeah, I know it's one of the most frustrating things that counties have to deal with. And I think I told the story not too awful long ago. The very first committee meeting I had when I got elected in 2005 was actually in this building. That was a local government meeting, and there was a presentation on jails, and I listened to Julie and Carol talk about how this was going to kill counties and should have let the state take over jails long ago. And I don't think I've been to a county meeting or a judge executives meeting since then where this hasn't been top of mind. And I do understand it. And I think we now have a general acknowledgement in the legislature, as you've seen, some additional funding steps that we've taken. But I do think that the ultimate solution, and we've had some conversations with KACo leadership about this, I think the ultimate solution, it needs to come from the counties themselves, as with a plan of how to wrap these facilities into a more efficient mechanism. I mean, the fact remains that we've got to get comfortable with the fact that if one jail can house an inmate for $50 a day and another jail houses an inmate for $100 a day, that's not an efficient operating system. And that gets into difficult decisions that have to be made, and I understand that, and we try to be mindful of that. But we also have to be mindful of how to best use state dollars. I think that there is pretty good consensus around doing more regionalization, building more efficient facilities, and certainly there will be some state support for that.
The biggest cost driver in a county budget, generally speaking, is the jail, and it's the pre-adjudication incarceree. In that group of people, it is generally your long-term, not what I call the Monday morning usuals, that are going to sit there and be awaiting trial for 6, 8, 10, 12 months, if not longer, that then become healthcare problems. So actually, Shellie, you and I have been talking about this for a long time. Because one of the first regional jails happened to be in my district with the Three Forks between Wolf Lee and Owsley, and I think it's helped them a lot to do that. And then we did the subsidy for non-jail counties to be transport agents because it helped state police looking at that. But the speaker's right. We got to look at something, but we asked the Justice Cabinet to look at that group of high-cost detainees to give us a report about, how many are there, what's the incarceration time, what would be the cost on average of these individuals taking different classes, being those that are being held for capital offenses, death penalty cases, juveniles that are being up to being tried as an adult, Class A, Class B, which are generally your violent and sexual crimes, that are going to be held for a long period of times, and then they develop, while they're there, healthcare costs. About if we were to do a process of a 90-day hold, a 60-day hold, because that's generally when you do most of your work in the court system, and then go to a regional model, which is very similar to what the feds do. If you're defending somebody in the London District Court, you will have to go to Litchfield to visit your client. But if you need that individual brought back for a hearing, they can come to the Laurel County Jail. It would be much more efficient for us to do something like that and take those costs off of the county, because those are the bigger cost drivers. But let's just say, Justice Cabinet didn't do a really good job of giving us good data on it. Matter of fact, it was pretty pathetic. So we asked for it. They haven't given it to us in a way that's good, but we'll work through it and see what we can come up with solutions. But we understand the issue.
I think it's certainly been impacted too by inflation, right? With medical costs, with food costs, with the wages having to be higher. Just something that continues to hemorrhage county budgets for sure. Thank you all for your work on it.
And the county's got to do some cooperation too, because we did a 300-bed jail. The Three Forks jail is designed to where you can add wings to it. We tried to pass the legislation, and we did pass the legislation that told the Justice Cabinet to develop, like South Carolina did, a whole series of plans, so you remove 7% of your soft cost on development, and that way it's easier to assess the per prisoner, per cost, per meal, all the way down to a per day basis. And they didn't do it, and that was 2 governors ago. And I think there was some litigation between 3 or 4 counties. But then you have to build at a minimum of a 300-bed facility to get the economies of scale. And so you can't build a 100-bed jail and then expect somebody to do that. It either needs to be regionalized, or you need to go above 300 beds.
Thank you all for the per diem increase a couple of years ago. That was a big help to the full service. Thank you for the $20,000 you give to the county officials out here whose counties' jails are closed. It certainly helps, and we appreciate that. So let's talk roads and bridges. That's always another fun topic. As you all know, we're responsible for half of all the roads, a third of all the bridges, and that bridge program, by the way, has been a fantastic help. We were talking about that again yesterday. And the CPPP program in 24, now LARP. Maybe you can use AI to come up with better acronyms or something, I don't know. But we appreciate that funding. And I know that over $80 million that was submitted, I think it was closer to 90 this time for that list was from county. So thank you for those. So we know the state motor fuels tax is the main source for funding for our roads. We get, I think, a little over 18% of that. It's insufficient. It's insufficient for what the state needs are. It's insufficient for local governments. I know we've talked about the gas tax many times throughout my career. And I mean, realistically speaking, that's probably not going to happen. So are there any other ways that you all are looking at, or your caucuses are looking at, to find a way to increase that amount, not just for county roads, but for the state projects that are so important to all of us?
Well, I'm going to say that roads, and we did $450 million in impact districts. We did that with defining and not the monies that went back to the counties on a policy basis, not based on a political basis.
Right.
But the whole system needs reworked, because you've talked gas tax. And I know this group thought I was crazy about 8 or 9 years ago when I kept saying, you better start looking at electric vehicle tax models or hybrid tax models. It's kind of like AI.
Right.
It's coming. There's nothing you can do about it. And then the Amazon trucks and what they're doing, and what they're paying, all of that needs to be looked at. This is something we don't need to Band-Aid. We need to do a total revamp of the whole system. And that's hard.
It is hard.
I think the most frustrating part to me, and obviously we need to rework the formula, as Robert says, but the most frustrating part to me is we made a kind of an unprecedented step this past budget cycle of putting about $500 million of general fund money into the road plan. That's unprecedented. Only to see the Transportation Cabinet not get the projects out the door. The money is, last I saw, about $450 million in arrears that they have yet to award that is scheduled. We have, since we took the majority in the last 8 years, largely responsible was Sal Santoro, who was chair of our transportation budget. Revolutionized the way we construct our budget. For generations, the road fund had been used completely as a political tool. It was, in many cases, in my time in the legislature, it was as much as 250% overprogrammed. And the very first budget that Sal wrote was 106% programmed. The cabinet actually complained that it was too tight because they couldn't manage the schedule. I think the most recent budget that we passed that Ken Upchurch drafted was about 112% funded. So we've done that with the intention of using the road plan, the road dollars that we have as policy documents, as opposed to political tools. And to see a cabinet that has been incapable of getting those projects out the door. They continue to say that there's not enough capacity. Road contractors are saying they're starving to death. So there's a huge disconnect, and it's really frustrating as we look at how to go into this next budget and thinking about a House Bill 1 type of document where we are spending down some of our excess reserves. It's difficult to try to think about, okay, well, do we need to make another huge investment of general fund dollars, one-time dollars into the road plan without having any confidence that those projects are actually going to be built?
I hope people understand this, because David makes a good point. When you have 100% of your funds and you hear, well, you've got 10 or 15 or 20% over-programmed, a lot of people don't understand that. Well, you're going to run into a snail dart or an Indiana bat or something that's going to stop a project, and so you have to have another project ready to go. The other thing about this is the cabinet may get told this year, and some of the contractors may not like this, we'll have a further discussion, to do totally at-risk design builds. All right? Cabinet, you say you can get it out, you're not. Contractors, you say you have the capacity. Well, you got the capacity, then design it and build it within these parameters, and it's going to be a totally at-risk contract. So if they have to do the right-of-way, the utilities, everything else, totally at risk for the contractors. Then if they can't get it out, you can't blame the cabinet.
And you talked about going from the 106% to the 205%. Just curious, with shift going to that model, that has certainly helped. I've seen a project in my county that sat stale for 20 years that is now under construction because of that's a more responsible model to get things moving forward.
When you're over-programmed 150%, that's no road program at all. It's totally the discretion. And it's totally the discretion of the Republican or Democrat. The institution of the governorship has total discretion at that point in time. And it becomes a political document.
The shift formula, though, has been a great document, or a great tool. It's not devoid of political influence, obviously, but it does set a good baseline of where our priorities should be, and making reasonable decisions about how to spend dollars most effectively and efficiently.
When you talk about highway construction and expansion, obviously that also ties to economic development. It's always a focus for our counties and in the state, and obviously economic development looks different depending on where you're at in different parts of the state. Could you share your all's thoughts on where the state is positioned going forward and how counties could maximize their efforts in this space? Obviously, you all have been a part of huge policy wins that have really positioned the state for economic development. You've really led on that matter, and we're appreciative of that.
Well, I think you're going to continue to see us invest in infrastructure. That's one of the best tools that we have to provide assistance throughout the state to make sure that the infrastructure is adequate. It also gives us an opportunity to utilize one-time dollars that may not be otherwise available to truly improve the future of Kentucky. But I think the important thing to realize is, Kentucky's economy is real. And I'm not sure we've always known exactly that was true. But when I talk to my colleagues around the country, and I spend a lot of time commiserating with them, Kentucky's economy is real. We have based our budgeting on real numbers, on conservative budgeting, and on some level, I credit that. I'll credit it to Jason Petrie and Chris McDaniel, but I also credited it so much of this to luck. Many of our comparable states, our neighboring states, experienced booms long before we did. We were being left behind, but that also made them comfortable in spending money. We never got used to spending money in Kentucky, and so when, for example, all the federal money, the ARPA money came down, we were pretty stingy with it. We got chastised by a lot of people for not being bold enough and not being brave enough and not spending enough. But we managed to avoid, chasing the shiny objects and incurring additional expenses. And we've got Tennessee, which is obviously booming, Indiana, which is had great growth, but they both had to go back into session and cut their budgets. And we haven't, and that's because we resisted the urge to spend money that created additional expenses. And I think there's nothing that we can do more importantly when it comes to economic development than be on sound financial footing. Because when we have an opportunity to act, we have the cash to act on it. When we have a disaster, we have the cash to actually pay for it. We are not going back in debt. Sometimes it's hard to stay focused on those things. But we also have to continue to challenge ourselves. When we first passed our first versions of tax modernization, Tax Foundation, which is a very, very reputable think tank on conservative tax policy, had us ranked in the mid-30s as far as tax friendliness. We managed to work ourselves down into the teens. Now we've kind of backslid a little bit into the low 20s. And so that means we need to continue to challenge ourselves on how we can continue to improve tax policy to make us more competitive. But also keep in mind that we can't be as aggressive as we'd like to while we're still paying down pension debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to give a lot of kudos to David and the House, and I see the judge from Cumberland County here. I'm going to go back to the Senate President from Cumberland County. To be competitive, one is our tax code, one is our debt structure. When we have made the steps since 2016 to control our pension costs, that's why Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor now moved us from a C to an A rating. When businesses start looking at where they want to go, they want to see a tax code and they want to know that you've got a solid business plan. Maryland had to come in and cut $1 billion. So it was Republican and Democrat states that started chasing too many shiny objects. But then you start thinking about it and you say, well, what's the ratings from those companies mean? Well, when a company comes here or looks here and they think, well, wait a minute, your pension system's at 13% actuarial soundness, that means if everybody did that, we would be broke. We would owe 87% of a multi-billion-dollar problem. But now that we're not in that mode, they know that, hey, they're not going to raise their taxes. They're going to be able to continue to lower their taxes. It's an economics issue. So making sure we're on solid footing is, from a fiscal point, is a big, huge selling point to businesses that want to locate here. For businesses that are here, and you know this, Judge, I know how you got that beefed up look. It was, you've been working out down there in Harlan County. It's using the assets we have, just like SOAR did, that people want to move this state. 60 remote workers that have moved into 22 counties in eastern Kentucky with an average salary of $93,000 because we can sell our state. The other thing, again, with David, and I want to say this, I think both of us would agree upon this. If Mitch McConnell hadn't cut a deal, and it's critical to the whole state on the Brent Spence Bridge, we wouldn't be building any roads. We'd be paying for that bridge instead of the federal government. And it's a big deal that we don't have to spend the next 8 years of our total transportation budget to build that bridge. We could be building roads in Harlan County instead.
That's exactly right.
So election season is upon us, always a lot of fun. For our membership, of course, the full House and half the Senate. I think it's the even number districts this year that are up for election. Of course, everybody in this room, minus a couple of people, are not up, but the rest of you are. And
You should be thinking it after that video.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to happen. So, for those of our members that aren't at the Capitol every day, like some of us are, I think it's important for them to have an understanding of it is election year for your all's members. And so if you could just talk about how that election kind of impacts the session, maybe the pace of it, maybe what's filed and what's not, just the overall change, certainly that I see as a lobbyist when it's election year and when it's not for your all's folks. Speaker, you have any thoughts?
I'm proud of a lot of the things that we have done since taking the majority. One of the things I'm most proud of, though, is the fact that we ask and they respond. We ask our members to take tough votes. When I first joined the legislature, I don't think we ever voted on a bill that didn't pass 95 to nothing. And that's not the way you solve difficult problems. You solve difficult problems by making difficult decisions, and those are not easy votes. But we made the commitment when we took the majority that we were going to address difficult problems, and our members have responded, and they've kept that enthusiasm about tackling problems. They're not afraid to take a vote. They don't always love it, but they certainly will stand up, and they've been rewarded by it. They really have. So I'm proud of that. The other thing that we did, which I think does help a little bit, is we moved filing deadline earlier to the beginning of session, which certainly that takes some of the concerns out of play. But I will tell you, from a House management standpoint, the year after the election, it has become much more difficult than the year of election because we've had such incredible turnover. And Judge, thank you for your service. I know you're not running again, but appreciate everything you've done. But we continue to see people serve less and less time. And so, it's great to have that enthusiasm and energy, but it's also an incredible loss of institutional knowledge that is really important to the process.
It is.
That's probably the most valid point out of this. I don't think the dynamics of the Senate or the House are going to change a whole lot. Not numerical control. It's just we have taken tough votes, we've making tough decisions, and people see the results of those decisions. They may not understand when we talk about Moody's and Fitch and all that, but they understand when jobs come to Kentucky, and that's part of the reason they come. The biggest issue about elections is, well, when a Jimmy Higdon leaves, there goes 15 years of experience who knows how to deal with the transportation cabinet, knows how to deal with the shift program, understands his counterpart who is also leaving in the House. So, we're 10,000 feet persons. We have to know a little bit about everything, but not a lot about all things, because that's who we rely on, are the Upchurches and the Higdons to get down and come in with good, solid plans on transportation and advise us to that. And that creates the second year problem. It's not the election year. We're going to do all right. We're going to be in control. It's how we then reorganize and reshape our respective committees and our leadership and our process after an election cycle.
Certainly the education process, that first session, I mean, we go through the same thing, trying to educate our folks. You know, it takes a while to get up to speed on being a county judge for the first time, or a clerk, or sheriff, or coroner, or whatever. So we totally understand that.
It takes a while. I remember my first term, I'd worked for the previous guy for 5 years. And I went in and I thought I didn't know half of what I thought I knew. And I think that's, for everybody in this room, it's a learning experience. You learn something new every day. Want to end with a kind of I guess you could say a high point. I've mentioned this to you all before a couple of years ago in summer conferences, talked about this, something you all have invested in from a legislative perspective. How many in this room has got the chance to see, we're in Louisville, Jefferson County. How many of you got to see the Louisville Orchestra? If you get a chance to do that, you really need to do that. The legislature the last couple of budget cycles has funded the Louisville Orchestra to go out into the state, into Kentucky counties. You're seeing a picture on the screen from Harlan from just a couple of months ago. And if you think about an orchestra and how unifying and uniting that is they don't miss a beat. I mean, it's incredible. And how we all try to work together for the common good. And I think the orchestra probably displays that more than anything we see in society. But the chance for people to see that out in rural parts of the state has been great. I ran into a lady, she was 83 years old this time in Harlan, and she was crying at the end of it. And she said, "This is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to see an orchestra live." And, you know, that's what public service is about, is providing people an opportunity for something that they have never got to experience. And I just want to thank you all for that. I tell Teddy Abrams I'm an unpaid lobbyist for the Louisville Orchestra. So
He's got lots of those.
They're incredible. They
really are. And, you know, this was all their idea. I mean, they came to us, and Robert and I were both very supportive of the program, but it was all of their idea. And it was interesting. I had a meeting with Teddy a week or so back, and you know, here's a guy that's an international celebrity, and he said, you know, for the first time in years, he feels like he's really doing something meaningful.
Wow.
We had 1,281 people in Beattyville, Kentucky, that came from 10 counties. In a similar story, a lady came up and said, "My children," I think she was from Jackson County, said, "My children would have never had this opportunity."
Wow.
Great stuff.
Yep.
We do have one more thing, if we could keep you for just a minute.
While
Yeah.
you're getting your awards, I saw
That's
the
supposed to be a
gentleman-
surprise.
Oh, you just told me about their
Go ahead, please.
I want to talk about artificial intelligence. Folks, it's here. And a lot of the derogatory comments that are being fed into the system are not accurate. And there's going to be a big push to change the narrative on this. And this is not just a Kentucky issue. This becomes a geopolitical issue that has United States, China, and Russian implications. So be careful about what's being said. It may not even be generated within the geographic confines of the United States. And when you think about creating tax base, the one that is up and under construction, for property tax for a school system alone in Jefferson County, it's going to be over $10 million of tax revenue to them. So if you cut that in half and go to another county, can you imagine your school system having an infusion of $5 million a year in just taxes and creation of 300 to 400 good-paying jobs? Don't let you get misinformed and your constituencies get misinformed on the reality that artificial intelligence, it's here and it's only going to get bigger.
It's a really good point, Robert, and I would give that a bit of advice to all of you, particularly in areas that have an abundance or availability of energy. Start having these proactive conversations because things do get caught in a vacuum. And if you can start having these conversations with your community, developing some standards around how you will handle when you are approached, if you haven't already been approached, and start having an informative conversation with your communities in advance. I think it'll make a dramatic difference. We've seen some things get completely out of hand in some areas of the state, and I think that the more proactive you can be on having those conversations with your constituents, the better off you'll be.
And David, this is a really big issue right now, and it is a global issue. And I was talking to Congressman Guthrie. I think you've got some cowboys out there that you got to watch. Make sure you're dealing with legitimate people that have the backing of a Google or a Meta or somebody like that, or has the network and has done this. And don't get caught up in an Oldham County situation where you had some speculators and cowboys trying to come in and do something and say, hey, here's what's happening and this is what we can do. Well, show us your documents that you've got somebody on the backside that's serious.
True.
Good advice.
Very good advice, yes.
So just so all our members know, every year after the session, staff and our leadership go through and think about who was impactful, who was a county advocate for us, who helped us when we needed it. We don't give these out like candy. They're not in every legislator's office by any stretch of the imagination. So it takes a little bit of effort and support for a legislator to get this. And so we certainly want to present Speaker Osborne and President Stivers a County Advocate Award for 2025 for all the help that they give us. And you know, you all don't always see everything that goes on behind the scenes when we go and talk to these gentlemen. We appreciate the fact that you all go and talk to these gentlemen and your legislators. That relationship is key, because I could go and talk to all 138, but I don't vote for them. I don't know what's detailed going on in your all's communities, and you all do. And so we really appreciate the work you all do, but we want to show our appreciation. And we always get asked where they're made. Kentucky Correctional Industries makes these for us, and they do an excellent job. So on behalf of all of our members, we want to present you all with these and thank you for everything that you did for us and for counties during the 2025 session. So,
I said this, well, you can kind of read Oldham. I said this last year, and I really didn't mean it. You know, in these positions, we get a lot of memorabilia, we get a lot of plaques and things like that. But this is the coolest plaque that we get.
It is.
It really is. It really is a cool plaque, and I love displaying them in my office. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah, appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Appreciate it.